The courtroom fell silent the moment Emily Carter stepped inside, 7 months pregnant, terrified, yet refusing to back down. Across the aisle, tech mogul Logan Reed sat beside his glamorous mistress Vanessa Price, both wearing smug smiles. No one expected the explosion that followed, Vanessa lunging forward and kicking Emily in the stomach, sending shock and chaos through the room. What none of them knew was that the judge watching from the bench was the father Emily never knew. Emily Carter stepped into the Seattle family court with one hand gripping the metal railing and the other resting protectively on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant and carrying bruises no one could see. She moved with the stiff determination of someone who had been pushed far past her limits but still refused to break. The courthouse buzzed with reporters who shouted her name, flashing cameras in her face as if she were a celebrity scandal instead of a woman terrified for her life. Her attorney wasn't beside her yet, and the noise from the hallway pressed at her ears, making her heart race. Still, she kept moving, reminding herself that this was the only path left to protect her child. She wasn't here for revenge. She wasn't here for money. She was here because if she didn't fight today, she might not get another chance. Inside the courtroom, Logan Reed sat with the relaxed confidence of a man who had always controlled the narrative. His tailored suit looked like it had been pressed minutes before he stepped out of his luxury SUV, and his posture radiated entitlement. Logan wasn't just a tech billionaire, he was the face of West Coast innovation, a man praised on magazine covers, a visionary who built the social media empire LinkedIn. His public image was spotless, the boy genius turned CEO who donated to children's hospitals and delivered commencement speeches at Stanford. That was the version of him the world adored. But Emily knew the version behind closed doors, the one who controlled every dollar she spent, monitored every text she sent, and punished her with icy disdain whenever she dared to question him. And now, after months of emotional suffocation, financial manipulation, and threats whispered in the dark, she found herself standing across the aisle from him, praying the court would see the monster behind the mask. Sitting beside Logan was Vanessa Price, the influencer whose face appeared on every beauty brand billboard between Los Angeles and Portland. With her white designer dress, sculpted waves of blonde hair, and carefully curated gentle smile, Vanessa looked like she was attending a gala, not a legal hearing about domestic violence. Her hand slid lightly over Logan's arm, almost possessively, as if claiming territory. Every time Emily looked their way, Vanessa's expression sharpened with an almost predatory amusement. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see Emily vulnerable, exposed, and alone. Emily lowered her gaze briefly, focusing on her breathing. She reminded herself that she wasn't powerless, she had evidence. She had hospital records showing stress-induced complications in her pregnancy. She had messages from Logan threatening to fix things if she didn't stay in line. She had friends she hadn't been allowed to see anymore who were willing to testify. And she had the truth, something Logan had always underestimated. But truth didn't always win, especially not against a billionaire with the best legal team money could buy. Logan sat perfectly still, hands folded, the picture of calm control. The courtroom felt too small to contain all the tension, the reporters, the law clerks moving quickly from desk to desk, the spectators whispering as if they were watching the beginning of a political scandal instead of a woman fighting for her future. Emily stepped toward the petitioner's table, each step a reminder that her body was working overtime to protect the child inside her. Her legs trembled, her palms were sweating, but she kept her chin lifted, refusing to let Logan see the fear he had planted in her over the years. Today, she would not be the timid wife he manipulated. Today, she would speak. At the bench, Judge Marcus Hall studied the courtroom with a composed expression. His silver hair and impeccably pressed robe gave him a presence that commanded attention without effort. Emily had never met him before the hearing, but something about the way he watched her made her uneasy, not in a threatening way, but with a strange, almost searching curiosity. As she shifted her weight, she felt his eyes follow her for a moment too long, as if he were trying to place a memory he couldn't quite grasp. Logan's attorney, a polished corporate shark named Nathan Ellis, stood ready with a thick binder full of arguments designed to make Emily seem irrational and unpredictable, classic tactics used against women in domestic cases. Emily swallowed hard, feeling her throat tighten, but she drew a slow breath and steadied her voice. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to survive. The moment she settled into her seat, Vanessa leaned in close to Logan and whispered something that made him smirk, the kind of smirk he used to give Emily right before telling her she was overreacting, right before reminding her that no one would ever believe her over him. That expression alone was enough to make her stomach twist, but she forced herself not to react. She had come too far to slip now. A bailiff moved to close the courtroom doors. Emily focused on the rhythmic movement of his steps, grounding herself. Her baby shifted gently in her belly, as if sensing her tension, and she placed her hand over the small kick. "We okay," she whispered under her breath. She didn't know if she meant it, but saying it out loud helped. When Logan finally turned his gaze directly toward her, Emily felt a familiar coldness crawl up her spine. His eyes were calculating, unbothered, almost bored. It infuriated her that he could sit there so relaxed while she fought for the right to exist outside his shadow. Before the judge could begin the hearing, Vanessa rose abruptly from her seat, her eyes burning with resentment, and Emily instinctively straightened. Vanessa's body language was sharp and unpredictable. The way it often was during the rare times Emily encountered her in the past, times filled with thinly veiled threats and smirking cruelty. In that moment, Emily understood something vital. Vanessa didn't just hate her. Vanessa wanted to destroy her. And strangely, that realization calmed Emily. Because now she knew exactly what she was up against, not just a powerful man, but a woman willing to go to extremes to protect the lifestyle Logan offered her. Emily clasped her hands together on the table, lifted her chin once more, and faced them both. She wasn't the broken version of herself anymore. She wasn't the woman Logan had tried to erase. She was a mother fighting for her child, and she would endure whatever came next, even the storm she felt gathering in the courtroom, building toward something none of them were prepared for. Logan Reed's arrival at the Seattle family court had the chaotic energy of a Hollywood red carpet event. Cameras were already pointed toward the street as his black Cadillac Escalade slid to a controlled stop behind the barricades. Reporters surged forward, elbowing for position, shouting questions that ranged from theatrical outrage to flattering desperation. Logan stepped out as if the commotion were orchestrated for him alone, adjusting the sleeves of his custom charcoal suit with the precision of a man used to performing under bright lights. He flashed a polite, almost charming smile, the one he used on magazine covers and award stages, because in his world, the truth didn't matter half as much as the image. Every movement was intentional, every gesture calculated. Logan Reed wasn't merely a billionaire tech mogul. He was the kind of public figure people thought they knew. The self-made visionary, the philanthropist CEO. The American dream with a jawline. His team had spent years grooming that persona until it gleamed. And even now, as domestic violence allegations swirled around him, he walked toward the courthouse with the confidence of someone who believed there was no storm he couldn't outspend, outmaneuver, or overpower. The crowd's reaction shifted the moment Vanessa Price stepped out of the SUV behind him. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement, her white satin dress hugging every curated curve. Vanessa wasn't just a pretty face. She was a social media superstar with millions of followers, brand deals, and a reputation for turning any public moment into a stage. Today was no exception. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled into soft, effortless waves that likely required 2 stylists and 4 products. She laid her hand lightly on Logan's arm, tilting her head toward him with a soft, sympathetic expression, the kind engineered to evoke pity from an audience that didn't know better. In an instant, the cameras shifted toward her, lenses snapping rapidly as if she were a movie star arriving at a premiere rather than the mistress of a married man walking into a domestic violence hearing. She soaked in the attention, her eyes sparkling with a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. Vanessa loved being seen. She lived for admiration, for the spotlight, for moments when the world paused long enough to watch her perform. And this, despite the ugliness of the circumstances, was just another performance. Logan wrapped an arm around her waist briefly, steadying her, though the gesture was as much about presentation as comfort. Together they looked like a perfectly polished celebrity couple, unfairly targeted by scandal. At least, that was the narrative they intended to sell. Reporters ate it up, microphones extended toward them like metal pedals. "Mr. Reed, are the allegations true? Did you hurt your wife? Vanessa, what is your role in all of this? Were you present during the incident? Is Emily Carter mentally unstable as your attorney claims?" Logan didn't flinch. He placed a guiding hand on Vanessa's back, ushering her toward the courthouse steps with a practiced calmness that came from years of public handling. "We'll let the truth speak for itself," he told the crowd smoothly, his voice steady, controlled, and deep, exactly the tone he used in interviews. That one sentence was enough to shift several reporters' attitudes. Logan had that effect on people. It was the same skill he used in boardrooms, negotiations, and political fundraisers, the ability to reshape perception with 2 or 3 words. Vanessa leaned into him, nodding softly, her lower lip trembling in a calculated show of emotional strain. She whispered something to him just loud enough that the nearest cameras could pick up the movement of her lips, but not the actual words. Logan's jaw flexed in a way that could be interpreted as either frustration or protective affection, depending on what story viewers preferred to believe. They had rehearsed this dynamic, they had crafted every beat. To an untrained eye, they looked like a couple weathering a storm together. To anyone who knew Logan Reed personally, they looked dangerous. As they climbed the courthouse steps, supporters shouted encouragement. "We re with you, Logan. Stay strong, man. Don't let her ruin your life." Signs waved overhead, some calling him a hero, some calling Emily a liar. Vanessa's gaze flickered across the crowd, and for a brief second, her expression sharpened into something cold and triumphant. She believed the narrative they had spun. She believed the power Logan promised her. She believed that whatever happened inside that courtroom would end in victory, because Logan had assured her that Emily would crumble the moment she saw him. But as they neared the courthouse doors, Vanessa caught sight of Emily standing by the security checkpoint. Emily, pale and pregnant, clutching the edge of the table for balance. Emily, wearing no makeup, no glamorous dress, no rehearsed expression. Emily, whose eyes held exhaustion, fear, and something else. Resolve. Vanessa's jaw tensed. She wasn't used to being ignored. She wasn't used to being challenged. In her mind, Emily should have been destroyed by now, emotionally shattered, socially humiliated, financially cornered. Emily wasn't supposed to stand tall. She wasn't supposed to glare back. She wasn't supposed to exist as anything other than an obstacle to be removed. Something hot and ugly flashed across Vanessa's features before she carefully smoothed her expression again. Logan followed her gaze and stopped walking for half a heartbeat when he spotted Emily. His mouth twitched, not in surprise but in irritation, like a man annoyed that a problem he thought he'd solved had somehow resurfaced. And then, with a slight roll of his shoulders, he slipped effortlessly back into character. Vanessa squeezed his arm as if they were preparing to enter a movie set. Logan straightened his posture, adjusted his cufflinks, and lifted his chin. Emily looked directly at him, and instead of shrinking back like Vanessa expected, she pressed her hand against her belly protectively, and lifted her chin in return. It was a small gesture, but ignited something inside Vanessa, the kind of burning jealousy that had been simmering quietly for months. Because Emily wasn't supposed to have anything left, not dignity, not strength, not defiance, and yet there she was, standing, breathing, fighting. Vanessa leaned closer to Logan, her voice low but sharp. "She's playing the victim." Logan didn't answer. He didn't have to. His eyes had already darkened, and that was enough for Vanessa to feel vindicated. Together they pushed open the courthouse doors. The cameras kept flashing behind them. The tension traveled with them like heat waves. And as Logan walked in the courtroom with Vanessa clinging tightly to his side, the air thickened, not with quiet, but with expectation. Something was about to snap. And none of them, not Logan, not Vanessa, not the crowd outside, understood just how far the consequences of this day would reach. Inside the courtroom, tension moved like static electricity, visible in the stiff postures, the whispered conversations, the tapping of pens against legal pads. Emily Carter stood near her table, steadying her breathing as she adjusted the fold of her maternity blouse, one hand drifting to her stomach in an instinctive gesture of protection. She tried to stay focused on her attorney's quiet instructions, but the room felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if every wall leaned inward with the weight of judgment. Across the aisle, Logan and Vanessa took their seats as if they owned the building. Vanessa crossed one shapely leg over the other and leaned back, surveying the courtroom like a queen arriving at her court. Her eyes swept over the reporters, the judge's bench, the opposing attorneys, and finally, inevitably, locked onto Emily. The curve at the corner of Vanessa's mouth sharpened into a smirk that carried pure contempt, an expression too brief for cameras to capture, yet unmistakably deliberate. Emily dropped her gaze to her hands, but she wasn't fast enough to avoid the sting. She could feel Vanessa's stare burning into her, feeding on her vulnerability. Her attorney, Julia Monroe, whispered updates about what to expect procedurally, but Emily's focus wavered. She couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa wasn't just here to witness the hearing, she was here to provoke her, taunt her, intimidate her. Emily swallowed, trying to steady her racing pulse. For years she had lived in the shadow of Logan's manipulation, his subtle but relentless efforts to reshape her sense of reality. He dismissed her fears, controlled her finances, told her which friends were bad influences, and demanded she delete contacts from her phone. Then came the threats, the quiet reminders that he had the power to take everything from her, including her future child, if she ever dared to push back. Now, seeing him whispering calmly to Vanessa as if none of it mattered, Emily realized how deeply she had underestimated his capacity for cruelty. Logan adjusted the lapel of his suit and leaned toward Vanessa, whispering something low that made her laugh softly. It was the kind of intimate, dismissive laugh meant to signal superiority. Emily shivered. They looked so perfectly synchronized, so united in their disdain for her, that for one brief second she faltered. She wondered if she truly stood a chance against them, two people with money, power, and an appetite for control. Vanessa flicked her hair back, clearly enjoying the attention from reporters outside the courtroom doors. She thrived on chaos when she was the center of it. But when the judge entered and everyone rose, she stiffened slightly and squeezed Logan's arm, as if seeking reassurance. Logan gave her a small nod. The gesture looked affectionate, protective even. But Emily had been on the receiving end of that same nod once before she learned it meant obedience, not comfort. Judge Marcus Hall settled behind the bench and surveyed the room. His eyes drifted from Logan to Vanessa to Emily, lingering a fraction longer on Emily than was typical. Emily didn't notice. She was too focused on managing her anxiety, but Vanessa noticed. Vanessa noticed everything. And the moment she saw the judge's gaze linger on Emily, a flicker of jealousy twisted her features. Logan didn't catch it. He was too busy pretending to look calm, confident, ranged. But Vanessa's attention sharpened, like a predator spotting something it didn't like. The hearing began with procedural statements, legal jargon Emily barely absorbed. Then Julia rose and presented the request for a protective order, citing incidents of psychological manipulation, financial control, and escalating threats. Emily stood when prompted, her legs trembling, one hand instinctively covering her belly again. She caught Vanessa's expression, the narrowed eyes, the mocking amusement, and felt heat rush up her neck. She tried to focus on Julia's steady voice, but the room felt distorted, like she was underwater and everyone else was watching from above. When Logan's attorney rose to respond, he played his role with chilling precision. He painted Emily as overwhelmed, emotional, prone to exaggeration due to pregnancy stress. He suggested she misunderstood Logan's intentions. He accused her of trying to weaponize her pregnancy to gain sympathy. Emily clenched her jaw, each accusation hitting like a slap. Vanessa, meanwhile, sat back with her arms folded, nodding along, eyes half-lidded in feigned pity. But when Julia presented evidence of Logan's threatening messages, Vanessa's posture tightened. She whispered urgently to Logan, who brushed her hand off a brief, sharp gesture that stunned her into stillness. Vanessa's eyes flashed with wounded anger. That was the first crack, small but enough to reveal the fragility beneath her polished exterior. Then Julia referenced Logan's infidelity, something they had evidence for but had not yet revealed in full. The courtroom reacted immediately. Reporters scribbled notes, spectators murmured, Logan stiffened, and Vanessa snapped. Vanessa pushed back her chair so abruptly it made several heads turn. She stood pointing at Emily like a prosecutor preparing to deliver the final blow. She's lying. Everything she's saying is a lie. Her voice rose higher and sharper with each word. Logan reached back to pull her down, but Vanessa whirled away from him, fueled by jealousy, anger, and something far darker, a desperate need to reclaim control. Julia objected. The bailiff stepped forward. But Vanessa kept going, her voice cracking as she hurled accusation after accusation at the pregnant woman standing across the room. The judge pounded his gavel sharply, warning Vanessa to sit immediately. But Vanessa wasn't listening. In her mind, she had become the victim, Emily the villain who dared to expose her, undermine her, threaten the role she believed she rightfully held at Logan's side. Emily's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She felt cornered, overwhelmed, and painfully exposed in front of strangers. She tried to step backward, but her foot grazed the leg of a chair, and she stumbled slightly enough for Vanessa to grin. Vanessa's smile wasn't amused, it was triumphant, the kind of smile that revealed how much she'd been waiting for Emily to falter. Then with no warning, no hesitation, Vanessa lunged forward. It happened so fast Emily barely had time to register the movement. Vanessa's heels struck the floor in sharp, angry strides. Her arm shot out for balance as she raised her leg with brutal momentum. And before anyone, not the bailiff, not Logan, not the judge, could stop her, Vanessa's foot collided violently with Emily's abdomen. The thud echoed across the room. Emily gasped as pain exploded across her belly, white, hot, and agonizing. Her knees buckled. She doubled over, arms instinctively wrapping around her stomach as her breath tore from her lungs. Julia screamed her name. Chairs scraped. People shouted. The courtroom erupted. Emily collapsed to the floor, her palms shaking violently as she tried to hold onto her stomach. She felt a rush of warm fluid wetting the floor beneath her. Panic seized her. Not here, not like this, her baby. Vanessa stumbled backward, her chest heaving, her expression morphing from rage to shock. Logan grabbed her arm, but she jerked away, wide-eyed and trembling. Emily's vision blurred at the edges. The room spun, people were shouting. The judge stood abruptly, face flushed with fury. None of it reached Emily clearly. The only thing she felt was the pain, the fear, and the terrifying possibility that the worst had already begun. Pain ripped through Emily Carter's body in a way she had never experienced, a violent, crushing pressure that stole her breath and folded her to the floor. She gasped, her hands flying instinctively to her stomach, trying desperately to cradle the baby inside her. The sharp impact of Vanessa's kick burned across her abdomen, radiating outward like an electric shock. The cold courtroom floor pressed against her cheek as she struggled to breathe, her vision swimming in and out of focus. She heard the panicked footsteps around her, voices rising, chairs scraping, but everything felt distant, as if the world had suddenly moved 10 feet away. All she could feel was the pain and the terrifying rush of warm fluid spreading beneath her. Her mind raced, terror gripping her throat. "It's too soon now, please hold on." Her fingers trembled violently as she pressed them into her belly, trying to protect the life inside her, like her bare hands could somehow shield her unborn child from the blow. Another wave of agony tore through her, sharp enough to knock the air from her lungs. She fought to inhale, fought to stay conscious, fought against the fear threatening to swallow her whole. She heard Julia shouting her name somewhere above her, her voice breaking with panic. The sound barely registered, muffled like it was underwater. Emily blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, but her eyes filled with tears she couldn't stop. Someone knelt beside her, one of the court officers, speaking rapid, urgent words she couldn't piece together. She forced her eyes open, trying to focus. The bright overhead lights glared against her blurry vision, making everything seem harsher. Her ears caught the pounding tempo of her own heartbeat, too fast, too loud, too frantic. Her baby wasn't moving. At least she couldn't feel it. Panic clawed at her chest. "My baby," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "My baby, help my baby." Her words cracked and dissolved into a sob as another contraction, like pain, twisted her insides. The officer pressed a steady hand to her shoulder and told her help was coming, but Emily could barely process the reassurance. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand someone undo what had just happened. Instead, she lay helpless on the courtroom floor, her world reduced to the unbearable pressure in her abdomen and the terror choking her breath. Across the room, Vanessa Price stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. She was trembling not with remorse, but with the sudden realization of what she had just done. Her chest heaved with each breath, makeup streaking as tears formed, yet her expression flickered with something uglier than guilt, fear. Logan grabbed her arm harshly, pulling her backward, whispering something angrily in her ear. Vanessa jerked her head away, staring at the spreading pool of fluid beneath Emily. Her lips parted, trembling, but she said nothing. The courtroom erupted around them. Reporters who had slipped inside shouted. Attorneys fumbled with their phones. Spectators pressed back against the walls, covering their mouths in horror. Judge Marcus Hall stood from the bench so abruptly that his chair hit the wall behind him. His face had drained of color, and for a moment, he looked as shaken as everyone else. But then some changed in his expression, something fierce, protective, and deeply personal. He pointed sharply toward the bailiff. "Call an ambulance now, move!" His voice boomed across the room, commanding immediate action. The bailiff sprinted toward the hall. The judge stepped down from the bench with more urgency than any of the courtroom staff had ever seen from him. He moved toward Emily, his normally composed features crumpling into raw concern. Something in him cracked open the moment he saw her lying there, trembling, whimpering in pain, fighting to protect a child she hadn't even met yet. He didn't know why it hit him so hard. He didn't understand the sudden, overwhelming urgency. But seeing her suffering on the floor struck him with a force that bypassed logic and went straight into his bones. Emily's breathing grew shallow. She tried to lift her head, but the pain dragged her back down. She could hear the judge's voice somewhere above her, ordering someone to bring blankets, demanding that security detain Vanessa, telling the clerk to clear the room. The courtroom cows blurred together around her. Her baby still wasn't moving. She felt sweat gathering on her forehead, mixing with tears that streamed down her cheeks. Her lips trembled uncontrollably. She tried to say something, to call for help, to beg someone to save her child, but the words stuck in her throat. Julia reached her side, dropping to her knees, gripping Emily's hand with both of hers. "Emily, look at me. Stay awake. Stay awake, okay?" Julia's voice shook with fear she didn't bother to hide. Emily tried to focus on her, but her vision doubled. Everything tilted. She felt dizzy, like the world was slipping. "It hurts," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know," Julia said, brushing hair away from her face. "Stay with me. We're going to the hospital. They're going to take care of you. Just stay with me." Emily wanted to believe her. She wanted to hold on. But every time the pain hit, it felt like her body was splitting open. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She felt another warm rush between her legs, more fluid, too much. "No," she choked out, panic rising. "No, no, no, my baby." Julia squeezed her hand harder. "Emily, don't give up. Do you hear me? Don't give up." Court officers rushed to form a perimeter, trying to clear the area. A paramedic team burst through the doors moments later, wheeling a gurney and a medical bag. The room pulsed with urgency as they dropped to their knees beside her, cutting open the side of her blouse to place monitors, calling out medical readings Emily didn't understand. Blood pressure dropping, possible placental abruption. "We need to move now." Emily's heart clenched at the words. Placental abruption, she knew enough to know that meant danger, real danger to her baby. She whimpered and reached for her stomach again, tears spilling faster. The paramedics lifted her carefully onto the gurney, strapping her down as gently as possible, but the movement made her cry out in raw agony. Her fingers clawed at the air, searching for something, anything to hold on to. Julia grabbed her hand again and jogged beside the gurney as they pushed her toward the hallway. "You're not alone," Julia said, her voice shaking. "You're going to be okay, I'm right here." Emily wanted to believe her, but the fear was overwhelming. Her vision flickered at the edges. She felt the world tilting again. As they reached the doorway, she caught a brief glimpse of Vanessa being held back by security, her face ghost pale, her body trembling. Logan stood slightly behind her, jaw clenched, eyes cold and calculating. Emily's heart twisted not from love, but from the cruel, humiliating realization that the man who vowed to protect her had brought her to this moment. Her body shivered uncontrollably as the gurney hit the hallway. The bright lights overhead blurred together with the frantic voices around her. She fought to keep her eyes open, to cling to consciousness. Pain pulsed through her again, sharp and merciless. Her stomach tightened. Her baby still wasn't moving. "Please," she whispered, her voice fragile and breaking. "Please live." And as the paramedics rushed her through the corridor toward the ambulance bay, Emily Carter clung desperately to the faint, trembling hope that her child was still fighting with her. The ambulance sped through downtown Seattle with its sirens piercing through traffic, yet Emily Carter barely registered the noise. Her world had narrowed to the sharp pain in her abdomen, the metallic taste in her mouth, and the terrifying uncertainty surrounding her baby's fate. She lay strapped to the gurney, eyes half open, struggling to focus on the swirling blur of ceiling lights above her. Every bump of the road sent a jolt of agony through her body, forcing her to bite down on her trembling lip to stop from screaming. The paramedic beside her, a young man with steady hands and a firm voice, pressed a fetal Doppler against her stomach, adjusting the monitor with frantic precision. His brow tightened as he listened for the heartbeat. Emily watched him, desperation clawing at her throat. Is my baby okay?" She gasped, her voice raw. The paramedic didn't answer right away. He kept adjusting the device, moving the sensor in slow circles, searching for a rhythm, any rhythm that would ease the panic suffocating the back of the ambulance. Emily's eyes filled with tears as fear tightened around her chest. She tried to move her hand to her belly, but her limbs felt heavy, weak. "Please," she whispered, almost choking on the word. "Tell me something." Finally, the Doppler emitted a faint but steady thump. The paramedic exhaled in relief. "We have a heartbeat," he said, his tone firm and reassuring. "It's there, Emily, your baby's fighting." Her own breath shuddered out of her, a fragile mixture of relief and terror. The heartbeat was slower than before, she could tell from the paramedic's tense posture, but it was still there, still alive, still holding on. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her temple, but the pain didn't let up. It flared again, ripping through her abdomen like a jagged blade. Emily gasped, her fingers gripping the side rail of the gurney so tightly her knuckles turned white. The paramedic leaned closer, checking her vitals. "You're doing great," he assured her. "Stay with me, we're almost there." She wasn't sure how much longer she could stay conscious. Each wave of pain felt like it drained something essential from her. Her skin grew clammy, her breath uneven. The paramedic squeezed her shoulder. "Emily, look at me, don't drift. We're about to pull in." Emily blinked through the haze. She tried to focus on the paramedic's voice, using it like a rope anchoring her to the moment. She couldn't afford to pass out, not now, not until she knew her baby was safe. The doors flung open the moment the ambulance stopped at Seattle General Hospital. A team of nurses and doctors rushed toward them, pushing a second gurney. Emily was transferred quickly, voices overlapping as staff called out medical codes and instructions. Blood pressure dropping, "We need trauma bay 3. Is her on call? Possible abruption." The fluorescent lights overhead created a tunnel of bright white as Emily was rolled through the hallway. Each turn made her stomach clench, each jolt a reminder of the danger she and her baby were facing. She caught glimpses of faces, some urgent, some worried but none familiar. She felt unbearably alone. Her hands trembled as she reached for someone, anyone. "Please don't let my baby die," she managed, tears spilling down her cheeks. A blonde nurse leaned close and clasped her hand gently. "We won't," the nurse said, her voice full of conviction. "You're in the right place. We're going to take care of you and your little one." The warmth of her hand steadied Emily's trembling for just a moment. But when they pushed her into the exam room, equipment buzzing and monitors beeping rapidly, the reality of the situation hit her fully. A doctor approached, introducing himself as Drit Patel, speaking in a calm yet urgent tone. "Emily, I need you to stay as still as you can while we check your baby. We're running an ultrasound immediately." Cold gel spread across her abdomen as a technician moved the probe methodically. Emily watched the screen through blurred eyes, desperate for any sign of movement. At first the grainy image remained still. Emily felt her breath seize. But then finally a small flicker appeared, weak, slower than normal. But there, Director Paddle leaned closer. "Your baby has a heartbeat," he confirmed. "But we were concerned about your placenta. You've had some bleeding. We need to monitor both of you closely. You're not out of danger yet." Emily nodded, though her breath trembled. She lifted a shaky hand to her belly. "Just don't let anything happen to her," she whispered, "please." Director Paddle's eyes softened. "We were going to do everything we can. I promise you that." Nurses moved around her, securing of lines, checking her oxygen, adjusting monitors that beeped at irregular rhythms that made her anxiety spike. The room felt too bright, too fast, too loud. Every sound fed her panic. The heart monitor beside her beeped in slow, deliberate beats. Emily clung to that sound as if her life and her baby's depended on it. Because it did. Minutes passed like hours as the staff worked around her. Emily's thoughts drifted toward Logan, the man who had sworn to love her, protect her, cherish her. Instead, he had become the reason she was bleeding on a hospital bed, praying her child would survive. Then she thought of Vanessa, her heel striking Emily's stomach with vicious force, fueled by jealousy and rage. The image replayed in her mind, each replay tightening her chest. How could someone hate her so much? What had she ever done besides try to survive the chaos Logan created? Another contraction like pain hit, wrenching her body. Emily cried out, tears streaming down her face. A nurse hurried to her side, gripping her hand. "It's okay, Emily. I know it hurts. Breathe with me." The nurse guided her through slow, shaky breaths until the pain receded enough for Emily to unclench her jaw. Her whole body felt drained, trembling, as if every nerve had been stretched to its limit. Moments later, Emily's phone buzzed from where a nurse had placed it on the counter. The vibration echoed sharply. The nurse picked it up. "Do you want me to answer?" Emily tried to speak, but fear clogged her throat. She nodded. When the nurse held the phone to her ear, Emily expected to hear Julia's voice. Instead, Logan's cold, controlled tone seeped through the speaker. "Emily, don't talk to anyone," he ordered. "Don't make this bigger than it is. If you push this, I swear you will regret it." Emily's breath hitched. The nurse's eyes widened, realizing exactly who was speaking to her. Emily forced strength into her voice she didn't feel. "Stay away from me," she whispered. Logan scoffed. "You think that stunt in court will save you?" The line cut abruptly. Emily's entire body shook. The nurse gently took the phone and set it aside. "You're safe here," she said softly. "Focus on you and your baby." Emily nodded weakly, though fear still clung to her. She wasn't safe, not yet. But for now, she was still fighting, and so was her child. The monitor beeped again, steady but fragile. Emily closed her eyes, resting a hand on her belly. "Hold on," she whispered to her baby. "Please just hold on." Emily Carter lay in her hospital bed with the monitors softly beeping beside her, each sound a fragile reminder that her daughter was still holding on. Her abdomen ached in deep, pulsing waves, and every time she shifted even slightly, a sharp reminder of the kick cut through her like a knife. Hours had passed since she'd been rushed in from the courthouse, and though the bleeding had slowed and the fetal heartbeat was stable for the moment, the doctors warned her she wasn't out of danger. She needed rest, monitoring, and calm, something she hadn't felt in years and wasn't likely to feel anytime soon. She rubbed a trembling hand over her belly, whispering soft words of reassurance to her unborn daughter. The hospital room felt cold, unfamiliar, and too exposed, but at least here, she was away from Logan's influence, at least physically. Mentally, he was still everywhere. His voice still echoed in her mind, replaying threats he'd made over the past months, promises of consequences, lines delivered with chilling calmness. She tried to push them away, but the memory of their last conversation, the one he forced on her from the hospital room earlier, kept clawing back. Even now, her fingers flinched at the thought of her phone vibrating. A knock came at the door, quick and professional. Emily stiffened instinctively. Hospitals always had people coming in and out, the nurses, the on-call doctors, aides doing rounds, but something about this knock felt different. Before she could respond, the door opened and a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a nurse. And he definitely wasn't someone here for her well-being. His polished shoes clicked softly against the floor as he approached her bed, holding a thick leather briefcase under one arm. His expression was neutral, almost pleasant, but there was no warmth behind it. "Mrs. Reed," he greeted her, using Logan's last name as if it belonged to her. Emily's stomach nodded. "My name is Charles Avery. I represent your husband." She instinctively pressed her hand protectively to her stomach. "I'm not his wife anymore," she whispered, her voice weak but resolute. Charles offered a practiced smile, the kind designed to disarm. "Of course. I understand tensions are high. I'm simply here to help resolve things quickly and peacefully." He slid a stack of papers onto the rolling bedside table. The weight of them made a dull thud. Emily stared at the envelope like it was a loaded weapon. What is that? A settlement agreement, he replied smoothly, flipping open the cover. Mr. Reed wishes to ensure you were taken care of financially. He's quite generous, actually. He began outlining the terms, flipping through pages as if discussing something mundane. Emily listened in growing horror. Logan was offering her a lump sum, just enough to appear charitable, not enough to cover her medical bills long term. In exchange, she would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from speaking about the attack, the abuse, or anything regarding their marriage. She would forfeit claims to their shared assets. Worse, she would only receive supervised visitation when the baby was born. This is insane, she rasped, her throat tightening. He did this. He and Vanessa, Mrs. Reed. Charles interrupted gently, though his tone carried a sharp undertone. Let's not rehash false accusations. The court of public opinion can be unpredictable. You don't want this to escalate further. Your emotional state is already under scrutiny. Emily's chest tightened. She felt the stab of humiliation, anger, and fear all at once. He flipped to a page with her name typed in neat block letters above a signature line. If you sign, this matter disappears. No drawn-out court battles, no reputation damage. You'll be able to move forward peacefully and focus on your pregnancy. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and if I don't sign, Charles paused, closing the folder slowly. Then Reed will pursue full custody immediately after the birth. He is prepared to argue that your recent behavior, he gestured vaguely to her, indicates instability and unfitness. Emily felt slapped. Tears burned behind her eyes. My behavior, she whispered, her voice cracking. I was attacked. Charles remained unmoved. You fell. The video is unclear, and given your current medical condition, the court may question your stress levels and judgment. Let's avoid that. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The walls felt like they were closing in again. Logan had planned this, every part of it. He wanted control of the child. He wanted control of the story. He wanted control of her. And even here, in a hospital bed, bruised and terrified, he was still tightening the noose. Charles tapped the pen against the contract calmly. Think of your child's future. Signing ensures stability. Emily's breath hitched as she looked down at the papers. Her baby kicked faintly, a fragile reminder of the life she was fighting for. She felt so small, so trapped, so painfully alone. A soft but firm voice broke through the tension. She's not signing anything. Both Emily and Charles turned as the door opened again. Nurse Abigail Turner Abbey stepped inside with a fresh chart pressed to her chest. Her brown hair was pulled into a bun, and her eyes narrowed slightly as she assessed the scene. This is a restricted medical recovery room, she said briskly. Only medical staff and approved family are allowed. You need to leave immediately. Charles straightened. I'm her husband's legal representative, which means nothing here. Abby cut in, stepping between him and the bed. You are interfering with the recovery of a high-risk patient. If you don't walk out right now, I will call hospital security. Her tone held no room for negotiation. Charles opened his mouth, likely to argue, but Abby leaned closer, lowering her voice into something that carried a blade's edge. And I'll make sure your name is included in the incident report documenting coercion of a pregnant trauma patient. I'm sure the state board will love reading that. The attorney's jaw clenched. He snapped the contract shut, glaring at Emily as if she had personally inconvenienced him. This was a courtesy, he said coolly. I'll relay your refusal to Mr. Reed. Emily met his gaze, her hands still trembling but her eyes steady. Go ahead, she said, voice barely above a whisper yet stronger than before. Tell him I'm done being afraid. Charles hesitated only a moment before collecting his briefcase and leaving the room without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Emily exhaled shakily, her breath collapsing in relief. A sob tore from her chest, quiet, exhausted, involuntary. Abby immediately sat on the edge of the bed and placed a gentle hand on her arm. Hey, the nurse whispered, you're safe. I've seen men like him. They act big until someone stands up to them. You're stronger than you think. Emily covered her face with her hands, tears sliding through her fingers. He wants to take my baby, she choked out. He's trying to force me to disappear. Abby squeezed her arm. Not on my watch, she said firmly. You're not alone anymore. Emily lowered her hands slowly, her breathing unsteady but stabilizing. Why are you helping me? Abby's expression softened. Because I've seen too many women scared into signing away their rights. I won't let him break you the way he broke them. She leaned in, her voice steady. You're going to fight back and you're going to win. Emily didn't know how. She didn't know what the next hours, days, or weeks would bring. But for the first time since she collapsed in that courtroom, she felt a small, flickering spark of hope. Someone was on her side. Someone believed her. Someone wasn't afraid of Logan, and that small spark was enough to keep her going. Emily placed a shaking hand on her stomach. We were going to be okay, she whispered to her daughter. "I won't let him take you." Abby nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "Good," she murmured. "Because you've just taken the first step in taking your life back." Judge Marcus Hall remained in his chambers long after the courtroom had emptied. His hands braced on the edge of his mahogany desk as he stared down at the scattered documents in front of him. The room felt unusually tight, as if the walls themselves were crowding him. Moments earlier, he had watched paramedics rush Emily Carter out of his courtroom, her body curled in pain, her hands shaking violently as she clutched her stomach. He had presided over thousands of hearings in his 25-year career: divorces, custody battles, abuse cases, restraining orders, but never had he felt anything like the visceral punch that hit him when he saw her collapse. It wasn't just outrage at the violence, though that alone would have been enough. It was something deeper, inexplicable, a pull he couldn't rationalize. Emily's face, pale, frightened, trembling, had struck a chord so profound that even now, he couldn't steady his breathing. He'd tried to shake it off, to dismiss the feeling as human empathy, judicial responsibility, instinctive anger toward injustice. But none of that explained the strange ache in his chest, the unmistakable familiarity he felt when he looked at her. As if he had seen that face before, as if he had known her from another life, as if something long buried had clawed its way back to the surface. Marcus sank into his leather chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly beneath his chin. His heart hammered in a way that felt foreign, unfamiliar. Why her? Why did her pain feel personal? Why did he feel as though he had failed her somehow, even before he knew her name? He forced himself to breathe long and steady, then reached for the incident report his clerk had dropped off. It documented the assault, Vanessa Price's attack, the emergency evacuation, the witnesses, the immediate lockdown. He scanned through the pages, but his eyes kept drifting back to the line containing Emily's full name, Emily Grace Carter. The name tugged at something buried deep within him, something he hadn't allowed himself to revisit in decades. He shut the file and leaned back, closing his eyes. A memory surfaced: a young woman with soft eyes and long brown hair, laughing beneath a summer sky. Laura Carter. The first woman he had ever truly loved. The woman who had vanished from his life without explanation 29 years earlier. She had been pregnant when she disappeared, and he had never forgiven himself for failing to find her. Marcus's chest tightened painfully. He opened his eyes sharply, as though the memory itself were too bright to look at directly. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Emily sharing Laura's last name, her age, her features. That necklace she wore in court, he had noticed the pendant the moment she stepped into the room. A delicate silver charm shaped like a crescent moon. He had seen it before, hanging around Laura's neck the last night he ever saw her. He stood abruptly, pacing across the room as a wave of adrenaline surged through him. He didn't want hope, not after all these years of dead ends, unanswered questions, and aching uncertainty. But hope had a way of slipping in when logic cracked, and right now his logic felt dangerously thin. He moved to his filing cabinet, a place he hadn't opened in years, and pulled out a worn manila envelope. Inside were old photographs of Laura, their edges yellowed with time. He placed one on the desk beside the printed courtroom headshot of Emily. His hands trembled as he compared them. The resemblance wasn't vague, it wasn't superficial, it was undeniable. Emily Carter could be Laura's mirror. His breath hitched. He sat down heavily, gripping the edge of the desk to steady himself. "It can't be," he whispered, though the evidence in front of him suggested otherwise. For years he had searched for Laura through mutual friends, public records, private investigators, but she had simply vanished, as if the earth swallowed her whole. He eventually concluded she had left to protect their unborn child from his disapproving family, from the pressure of their young age, from fears she never voiced. And now, decades later, a pregnant woman named Emily Carter, who looked like Laura, wore her necklace and fell within the exact age range that matched the child he lost, had been carried bleeding from his courtroom. A flicker of dread burned through him. If Emily was Laura's daughter, if she was his daughter, then she was lying in a hospital fighting for the life of his grandchild. Marcus ran a trembling hand over his face. He needed answers now. With purposeful urgency, he marched to his computer and pulled up public records, legal archives, hospital logs, anything he could access ethically within his judicial authority. He typed Emily Grace Carter quickly, impatiently: birth records, hospital registration, emergency contact details. His eyes scanned rapidly. Then he froze. Emily's mother, Laura Carter, born the same year as the Laura he knew, deceased 6 years earlier. A gut punch knocked the air from his lungs. He leaned back in his chair, gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles whitened. It was her, it had to be her. And if Laura had been pregnant when she disappeared, Emily could be. His throat constricted. He rose abruptly and paced again, forcing himself to think, to breathe, to stay grounded despite the storm of emotions clawing at him. Judges were trained to remain rational, detached, objective, but nothing about this felt professional. Nothing about this felt like a case. This was personal, this was blood, history, loss, and a second chance he never expected to get. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Then he stopped, gripping the doorknob. He couldn't go to her not like this, not until he knew for certain. But he also couldn't sit here doing nothing while she was alone, terrified, and recover him an attack that could have killed her child. He returned to his desk and opened a secure channel, requesting the unedited courtroom footage from all angles, especially the overhead cameras. If he was going to understand what happened to Emily, he needed the truth without Logan Reed's influence. When the video loaded, he watched the assault unfold. He watched Emily's eyes widen with shock. He watched her crumble to the floor, her hands flying to her stomach. And when the camera zoomed for clarity, he saw her face contorted with pain, an expression he had seen once before. On Laura after a fall years ago, before she disappeared, Marcus felt something crack inside him. Rage surged hot and fast beneath his skin, rage at Logan, at Vanessa, at the world that had failed Emily over and over again. But beneath that rage was something just as powerful, a vow. He would not fail her, not this time, not ever again. Whether or not a DNA test confirmed his suspicions, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: Emily Carter needed someone on her side. And Marcus Hall was done watching from the bench. He straightened his shoulders, grabbed his keys, and headed for the hospital with a resolve he hadn't felt in decades. Emily didn't know it yet, but help was already on its way. And this time, she would not fight alone. Judge Marcus Hall arrived at Seattle General Hospital with a weight in his chest that felt almost unbearable. He moved with the brisk determination of a man accustomed to making decisions that changed lives, but tonight, every step felt unsteady. Every breath carried the burden of a truth he wasn't yet ready to face. The automatic doors slid open, flooding him with cold air and the sharp scent of disinfectant. His eyes adjusted to the harsh lights as he approached the reception desk, gripping the strap of his coat to hide the trimmer in his hand. "I need to check on a patient," he said, his tone firm but underscored by something softer. "Emily Carter. She was brought in from the courthouse a few hours ago." The nurse at the desk glanced at him, her expression shifting between suspicion and recognition. Judges were familiar figures in a city like Seattle. "Are you family?" she asked, her voice neutral. The question hit him like a strike to the ribs. He swallowed hard. For decades, he had trained himself to answer only with factual clarity. But this was something else. He hesitated, then forced the words out. "I'm checking on her welfare, please." The nurse hesitated, then nodded toward the elevators. "Trauma recovery, 3rd floor, room 37. A nurse named Abby Turner is with her. She won't let anyone near the patient without a good reason." Marcus exhaled a shaky breath. Good. Emily needed someone like that. Someone who didn't bend easily to authority, someone who protected her the way he should have protected Laura all those years ago. The elevator ride felt endless. Each floor that ticked by tightened the coil in his chest. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, his pulse was pounding in his ears. He followed the signs, turning down the long corridor with its 2 bright lights and muted footsteps. Room 317 had it partially closed. He stopped outside it, bracing his palm against the wall. He needed a moment to gather himself, to breathe, to prepare for the possibility that everything he suspected was true. He peeked through the small glass panel in the door. Emily lay in the hospital bed, pale and exhausted, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, her face streaked with tears, but even in her vulnerable state, she radiated a quiet strength. Strength he recognized, a strength he had once loved. Nurse Abby stood beside her, adjusting the fetal monitor. She spoke gently, her hand resting on Emily's arm in patient reassurance. Emily nodded weakly, though fear still lingered in her eyes. The sight twisted something deep inside him. She looked exactly like Laura, not just similar, exactly. The same soft jawline, the same expressive eyes, the same way her mouth tensed when she was trying not to cry. For a moment he felt as though time had folded in on itself, returning him to the night Laura disappeared, the night he lost the family he had never even met. He stepped back from the door, pressing his hand to his forehead. He needed answers, real answers, not the ones his desperate heart wanted to fill in. He took a slow breath, then knocked lightly. Nurse Abby opened the door halfway, eyeing him with guarded suspicion. "Can I help you?" Marcus cleared his throat. "My name is Marcus Hall. I'm the judge who oversaw her case today. I'm here to check on her condition." Abby's posture remained stiff. "She's resting. She doesn't need more stress." "I'm not here in an official capacity," he said quickly, his voice lowering. "This is personal." Abby studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. Marcus knew she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes, the way he kept glancing toward Emily. Abby stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. "Personal how?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was too big to spill out carelessly. "Please," he said softly. "I just need to know she's safe. I won't disturb her. I won't intrude. I just need to hear how she's doing." Abby's guardedness softened slightly. Something in his voice, maybe the quiet urgency, maybe the cracks he couldn't hide, seemed to convince her he wasn't here with bad intentions. "She's stable for now," Abby said gently. "The baby's heartbeat is steady, though slower than normal. The doctors are monitoring her for possible complications." Marcus exhaled, his breath trembling. Relief washed through him, followed by an equally powerful surge of fear. "Good," he whispered. "Thank God." Abby's expression shifted again, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Judge Hall, you care about her more than you were saying." Marcus looked away, staring at the tile floor. The truth clawed at his throat. I think he swallowed hard. "I think I might know her mother." Abby blinked in confusion. "Her mother?" Emily said. "She passed away years ago." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "But before that I knew her. A lifetime ago." Abby's eyes widened as she put the pieces together. "Are you saying you might be?" Marcus raised a trembling hand, stopping her. "I'm not saying anything until I'm certain." Emotion thickened his voice. "I can't let myself believe something this big without proof." Abby exhaled softly, her expression softening. "So what do you want to do?" Marcus drew in a shaky breath. "I want a DNA test," he admitted, the words falling out with the weight of a confession. "Not for legal reasons, for personal ones." "And Emily?" Abby asked gently. "Will you tell her?" He closed his eyes briefly. "Not yet. She's already carrying too much. I won't add more fear or confusion until we know the truth." Abby nodded slowly. "I can help you arrange a test," she said. Quietly, no lawyers, no paperwork that Logan can intercept. Marcus's gratitude nearly overwhelmed him. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're doing more than you know." Abby gave a small, reassuring smile. "Emily deserves people who fight for her." Marcus's gaze drifted to the door again, where Emily lay exhausted, unaware that the man standing outside might be the father she'd never known. "She does," he murmured, "and if I'm right, I owe her decades of being absent." Abby gently touched his arm, a small gesture of empathy. "You're here now." He nodded, though guilt still pressed heavily at his ribs. "May I just see her from the door?" Abby opened the door quietly and let him look inside. Emily lay sleeping now, curled slightly on her side, one hand resting over her belly. The monitor beeped in steady, fragile intervals. For a long moment, Marcus stood there, his chest aching with a mixture of longing, grief, and fierce protectiveness. She looked so young, so breakable, so painfully familiar. After several seconds, he stepped back, whispering only to himself, "If you re my daughter, I swear, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Abby closed the door softly. Marcus turned and walked down the hallway, each step echoing with the possibility that he had just found the family he lost and the fear that he might already be too late to save them. Judge Marcus Hall spent the next 48 hours in an emotional storm he hadn't felt since he was a young man. He barely slept, he barely ate. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily lying in that hospital bed, pale, trembling, terrified, while a life-threatening injury had nearly taken his grandchild from the world before she even had a chance to breathe. The resemblance to Laura, the records, the necklace, everything pointed to one impossible, heartbreaking, undeniable truth. Emily wasn't just a stranger. She wasn't just a victim in his courtroom. She was his daughter. And Logan Reed, a man who manipulated the law like a personal weapon, was trying to destroy her. Marcus had always believed in the justice system, but he wasn't naive. He had seen powerful men twist it, bend it, choke it into shapes that suited their needs. Logan Reed wasn't merely wealthy. He was connected. He donated to campaigns, funded judicial conferences, sat on boards with politicians. He had friends in places where favor wasn't a request but a quiet expectation. If Marcus wanted to protect Emily, he couldn't do it alone. He needed people he could trust, people who weren't afraid of men like Logan. People who had already lost too much to corruption and weren't willing to lose more. People who, like him, had something at stake. So he made calls, not to colleagues who owed him favors or to officials who would weigh public perception before morality. He called people who had fought real fights, people who had scars from battles the public never heard about, people who weren't impressed or intimidated by Logan Reed's billions. The first person he contacted was Julia Monroe, Emily's attorney. Julia arrived at his chambers after hours, her red hair tied back, her expression sharp with exhaustion and angry determination. She didn't bother with small talk. "Is Emily safe?" she demanded, her tone clipped. "Is the baby stable?" Marcus nodded. "She's stable for now." But Logan's attorney attempted to coerce her into signing a non-disclosure agreement while she was still recovering. Julia's jaw clenched. "Of course he did. He wants to bury this before it can go public." "He's not going to bury anything," Marcus said, his voice low and steady. "But we need to approach this strategically." Julia crossed her arms. "Why are you telling me this off the record?" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I believe there's more to this case than what we saw in court." And I believe Emily is in far more danger than she realizes. Julia studied him, narrowing her eyes. Marcus wasn't a man who cracked easily. He wasn't a man who involved himself personally. Something had shifted and she sensed it immediately. What aren't you saying? She asked. Marcus inhaled slowly. I have reason to believe Logan Reed had a hand in the death of his second wife. The room seemed to tilt. Julia's eyes widened. Her death was ruled a suicide. Yes, Marcus said conveniently quickly, too clean. Julia paced, her heels tapping against the floor. If you rewrite then Emily surviving that kick wasn't luck, it was a miracle. Which is why we were not waiting for the system to play out, he said. We were rebuilding a team, discreetly. Julia stopped pacing. Who else do you trust? Marcus hesitated only a moment before picking up his phone. Daniel Cross. Julia blinked. The federal prosecutor who left the Department of Justice after exposing the money laundering scheme. That Daniel. That's the one. Marcus said. He's brilliant, ruthless, and he despises men who exploit their wealth to avoid accountability. Julia smirked. So basically Logan's worst nightmare. Exactly. They set up a meeting that evening in a discreet law office Marcus had access to. Daniel Cross arrived wearing a dark blazer, stubble on his jaw, and eyes sharp with the cynicism of a man who had looked corruption in the face and lived to talk about it. You called in a favor, Daniel said, his voice low and gravelly. That means this is serious. Marcus gestured for him to sit. It is. In a steady voice, Marcus described the assault in court, the coerced settlement attempt, the suspicious death of Logan's second wife. The offshore accounts Daniel had suspected years ago but never had enough evidence to prosecute, and the danger Emily faced now. Daniel listened without interruption, but with every detail his expression hardened. I've known Logan Reed was trouble for a long time, he said finally. But this, assaulting a pregnant woman in a courtroom, cover-ups, threatening her in the hospital, that's beyond corruption. Marcus nodded. He thinks he's untouchable. Then let's change that, Daniel replied. The next person Marcus brought in was Detective Henry Cole, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for following the truth even when it led places it wasn't supposed to. He was tall, gray-haired, and walked with the deliberate posture of someone who had carried the weight of too many unsolved cases. Henry shook Marcus's hand firmly. I got your message, he said. You said this involved Reed. It does, Marcus replied. And it involves that case you were pulled off of 6 years ago. Henry's jaw tightened. The wife who died, yes. Henry's eyes darkened. I always knew something was off. But the department shut it down before I could get anywhere. That's why we need you now, Marcus said. Henry looked at him steadily. Then I'm all in. They spoke late into the night, piecing together what they each knew: Logan's finances, Vanessa's sudden rise to fame, the timing of his previous wife's death, connections between Reed Corporation and shell companies overseas, sealed police reports, and medical records that didn't align with the official story. And through it all, Marcus remained quiet about the truth he carried about Emily being his daughter. That part wasn't strategy, that was fear. Fear that he might be wrong, fear that he might be right. Fear of losing her before he had the chance to know her. As the team reviewed evidence, Julia leaned forward. We need one more person, she said. Someone who can keep an eye on Emily from the inside. Marcus nodded. Nurse Abby Turner. Julia raised a brow. The nurse who threw out Logan's attorney. The one who isn't intimidated by power, Marcus confirmed. She's already protecting Emily. Let's make it official. Abby joined them the following morning before her shift. She listened, wide-eyed but resolute, as Marcus explained only the essentials. Emily was in danger, Logan had a documented pattern of abuse, and they were working to gather evidence. Abby didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. Marcus looked around the room. Julia, Daniel, Henry, Abby. Each one was here because they believed in justice, because they refused to let a predator continue unchecked, because they saw the danger Emily and her unborn baby were in. They weren't just a legal team or an investigative group. They were a makeshift family forming around the woman who had been left alone too long. Marcus exhaled, feeling something shift in him. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about redemption. This was about protecting what he had lost and what he had miraculously found again. All right, he said, voice steady with conviction. Let's bring Logan Reed down. And with that, the real battle began. Detective Henry Cole sat alone in his dimly lit home office, a steaming mug of black coffee beside him and a mountain of old files spread across his desk. The room smelled faintly of paper, ink, and the bitterness of unfinished work. For years he had tried to push aside the case of Amanda Reed, Logan's second wife, an alleged suicide that had never sat right with him. The department shut it down in record time, citing mental health struggles and pregnancy stress. But Henry had seen enough crime scenes to know when something was wrong, and that case had been wrong from the moment he stepped inside the Reed penthouse. Now, with Emily Carter pregnant, injured, nearly killed, lying in a hospital bed, the old instincts roared back to life. Two pregnant women connected to Logan Reed, both harmed under suspicious circumstances. One dead, one barely clinging on. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern. Henry took a long drink of coffee and flipped open Amanda Reed's death file. The photos were exactly as he remembered, with Amanda lying at the bottom of the staircase, her nightgown soaked in blood. One hand outstretched as if reaching for something no one else could see. Her dark hair fanned around her head like a broken halo. The first thing that bothered Henry back then still bothered him now was the angle of her fall. The staircase was narrow but not steep. For her to hit with that much force, she would be needed to trip violently or be pushed. And he had never found a single convincing reason why she would have thrown herself down willingly, especially at 6 months pregnant. Henry spread out the autopsy report, the coroner's notes, the investigator's summary. The incident was marked as a fall-induced traumatic brain injury. The report was neat, efficient, and far too clean. Henry picked up a file he had kept hidden for years, notes he wrote but couldn't officially record. Scribbled observations, timelines, inconsistencies that the department told him to drop. He still remembered the day he submitted his concerns. His lieutenant called him into the office, shut the door, and said, "Reed's a dunner to half the city. This case is closed. Don't dig where you were not supposed to." Henry was furious then, now he was determined. He emailed Marcus Hall a simple message: "I'm reopening the Reed file, I'll bring proof." Marcus responded within minutes, "Whatever you need." And Henry needed everything. He pulled a fresh notepad toward him and wrote Amanda's name in bold letters. Beneath it, he wrote Emily's. The parallels were chilling: pregnant, isolated, emotionally worn down, under Logan's influence, harmed in a moment that could have been fatal. Henry wouldn't let the same story repeat, not this time. He began digging into Amanda's background, her medical records, therapy notes, even unused prescriptions she'd filled but never taken. One detail stuck out immediately: a voicemail Amanda left her sister 2 days before her death. He'd heard it back then but wasn't allowed to investigate it further. She sounded exhausted, out of breath, but hopeful. "I think I'm ready to leave him," Amanda whispered in the message. "I packed a bag. I just need to find the right time." 2 days later, she was dead. Henry clenched his jaw as anger simmered in his chest. He pulled up bank statements, focusing on transactions around the time of Amanda's death. Buried among business expenses and lavish spending were payments to two individuals he recognized instantly: former private security contractors with reputations for dealing in intimidation, often under the table. He traced the timing of one payment to the exact night Amanda died. That was enough to make his pulse jackhammer. Henry leaned forward, scribbling notes rapidly. He needed more, something physical, indisputable. He headed to the police storage facility where old evidence was kept, tucked away in dusty boxes no one touched. After checking his credentials, he walked down an aisle lined with shelves until he found the Reed case file box. The cardboard was worn at the edges. He pulled it down and carried it to the metal examination table. The box contained Amanda's phone, her broken necklace, a pair of blood-stained maternity pajamas, and the autopsy Cs. Henry put on gloves and powered on the phone, hooking it up to a digital forensics device he brought himself. A flood of images and messages appeared on the monitor. Photos of Amanda's bruises she never reported. Screenshots of texts she saved, threats from Logan during arguments where he accused her of ruining his life, being too needy, and being a burden with a baby he didn't want. Henry's breath tightened. He clicked further. Then he found a video. Amanda had recorded it just hours before she died. The footage was shaky, the lighting dim, but her terrified eyes were unmistakable. "If anything happens to me," she whispered, voice shaking. It wasn't an accident. Henry's heart pounded. This was it. This was the evidence he never found the courage or authority to bring forward. And now it could save Emily's life. He took photos of the video, made secure copies of the files, and locked everything in his briefcase. As he walked out of the evidence room, he felt lighter for the first time in years because he had the truth in his hands. On his drive to meet Marcus, he called Daniel Cross. "Have you got something big?" Henry said. "How big?" Daniel asked. "Big enough to bury Logan Reed." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Bring it." When Henry arrived at the private office, he spread out the evidence on the table. Julia Monroe gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth as tears of shock and fury filled her eyes. "He killed her," she whispered. "He absolutely killed her." Daniel leaned closer, his face hardening with each passing second. "This is premeditated, calculated. He used money to wipe the scene clean." Marcus stared at Amanda's final video, silent, emotion burning behind his eyes. Seeing another pregnant woman, another potential mother to his grandchild, could have died without justice made something inside him twist painfully. Henry sat down, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Emily's not safe," he said bluntly. "Reed has a pattern. He eliminates women who threaten his control. Emily left him. She testified against him. She's pregnant." Julia looked at Marcus. "If we don't stop him, he'll try again. We all know it." Marcus nodded slowly, his voice low and certain. Then we stop him, Henry exhaled, meeting their eyes. Amanda tried to escape and died trying. Emily survived the first blow, but that won't stop him. He's not done. The room crackled with shared determination. They had proof. They had motive, they had a team. And now, for the first time in years, Henry felt like justice wasn't just an idea, it was a promise. Let's bring him down, Henry said. The others nodded, each one carrying the same fire in their eyes. And with that, the case that had been buried was finally coming back to life this time, with no one to stop it. Daniel Cross had spent nearly a decade inside the U.S. Department of Justice hunting billionaires who believed laws were decorations meant for other people. He'd exposed money laundering networks, uncovered bribery schemes, taken down CEOs with offshore empires so complex that even their accountants couldn't map them. But Logan was a different breed. Daniel had suspected for years that Logan was laundering money, hiding assets, routing funds through shell corporations, bribing political figures and law enforcement to keep his empire clean. But Reed was slippery, protected by elite lawyers and connections that wrapped around him like armor. Now, with Henry uncovering evidence linking Logan to Amanda's suspicious death and Emily lying bruised and barely stable in a hospital room, Daniel's suspicion hardened into absolute certainty. Logan wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. And if they wanted to bring him down, they needed financial evidence strong enough to break through his empire. So Daniel got to work. He stepped into his home office, walls lined with case files, monitors glowing in cold blue light, and cracked his knuckles. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he accessed encrypted databases, old Dodge archives, and financial patterns he'd flagged years earlier but never had enough proof to pursue. All right, Logan, he muttered. Let's see where you buried the bodies. The first layer was easy. Reed Corporation's public filings were pristine, too pristine. Companies that honest usually had minor irregularities or harmless inconsistencies. Logan's books were perfect, too perfect, Daniel smirked. You rehiding something. He bypassed the corporate fee aid and dug into secondary entities, subsidiaries that weren't on the public radar. Reed Innovations, Silver Lattice Holdings, MindSync Development, all legitimate on paper but each shared strange financial signatures. Daniel zoomed in on one of Silver Lattice Holdings, registered in Delaware with a board consisting of 2 dead people and 1 man whose name appeared on dozens of offshore companies worldwide. Bingo, Daniel breathed. Shell company, classic. He followed the trail. Silver Lattice was connected to an investment entity in the Cayman Islands. That entity funded a consulting firm in the British Virgin Islands. That firm wired money to a private bank in Luxembourg, one used almost exclusively for hiding asset transfers. Daniel's pulse quickened. It was the same structure he'd seen in corruption cases, layers that hid the true controller. He traced the funds backward. Over 12 million had moved through those accounts in the past 3 years. The transfers always happened at 2:04 a.m. Pacific time when oversight was weakest. The amounts fluctuated, but the purpose remained constant. They avoided tax reporting thresholds. But it didn't stop there. Daniel dug deeper, using old credentials that technically weren't allowed but were absolutely necessary. He called a contact in international banking, a former colleague named Stefan, who owed him a favor. After a tense exchange and a few encrypted files, Daniel had what he needed. The Luxembourg account linked directly to Reed Global Asset Trust, a private family fund that Logan swore didn't exist. You bastard, Daniel whispered. It was the money Logan used to pay for cover-ups, to buy lawyers, to hire private intimidators, to silence people, including very likely the people involved in Amanda's death. Daniel leaned closer to the monitor, scanning the names attached to the fund. One stood out, Vanessa Price. She had her own line item quarterly payments labeled as media consulting, totaling nearly $17 million in 2 years. Logan's buying her loyalty, Daniel muttered, and her ignorance. But there was another name, one that made Daniel's stomach drop. Officer Raymond Trent, a police officer who had investigated Amanda's death, a man Henry remembered all too well. Daniel clicked the file. Multiple payments, all routed quietly, all disguised as consulting fees. And every payment matched a timeline. The moment Henry questioned the original ruling, the moment the case was closed, the moment the evidence disappeared. Corruption, full-blown corruption, Daniel said aloud. He kept going, the rabbit hole deepened. Payments to 2 judges, minor civil court judges, not criminal, likely used for small favors. Payments to political staffers. Donations routed illegally to campaigns. But the next discovery nearly made Daniel's breath stop. A transfer of $500 labeled it simply personal insurance EC. Daniel stared at the initials. Emily Carter. It had been sent 2 months before she filed for separation. 2 months before she finally left Logan. And here was Logan funding something labeled insurance against Emily. Insurance for what? Her silence, her submission. Daniel clicked on the metadata. The money went to a private firm specializing in digital surveillance and social media tracking. Logan had been monitoring her, watching her. recording her, preparing to destroy her credibility if she ever challenged him. Daniel's jaw tightened with anger, and then he found the final piece. A $1.2 million transfer to a private security contractor connected to the same men Henry flagged in Amanda's case. He was preparing to do it again, Dale whispered. He was building a plan to eliminate Emily the way he eliminated Amanda. Rage surged through him in a way he hadn't felt since the case that cost him his Dodge career. He gathered all the files, encrypted them twice, printed physical copies, and locked everything inside a black steel case. Then he drove straight to Marcus Hall's private office, his tires spinning slightly in the rain. Julia, Henry, and Abby were already there. When Daniel walked in, soaked and burning with fury, they all looked up. "Did you find anything?" Julia asked. Daniel dropped the black case on the table with a heavy thud. "I found enough to send Logan Reed to prison for the rest of his life." Henry leaned forward. "How bad is it?" Daniel opened the case and began laying out the files: offshore accounts, shell corporations, bribery payments, murder for hire financial patterns, surveillance contracts on Emily. Daniel's voice was grim as he spoke. "This isn't just money laundering. This is criminal infrastructure, bribery, fraud, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, potentially conspiracy to commit murder." Abby covered her mouth, horrified. Julia shook her head slowly, her eyes filling with angry tears. Henry cursed under his breath. Marcus sat completely still, hands folded tightly, jaw locked. When Daniel finished, he looked up at Marcus. "We can bring federal charges. Offshore accounts alone are enough to destroy him. But combined with Amanda's case and Emily's attack, this becomes airtight." Marcus exhaled, the weight of everything settling on him. "Then our next step is clear," he said. "We file. We expose him." Daniel nodded. "But we need to do it carefully. If Logan senses what we were doing, he'll run." Henry looked at the group, his voice steady. "Then we better move faster than him." And for the first time, the team wasn't just collecting evidence, they were preparing to strike. Logan Reed had hidden behind money and power for years, but now they were coming for him. And they weren't going to miss. Emily Carter woke the next morning to the soft hum of monitors beside her bed, her vision slowly sharpening as daylight filtered through the blinds. Her body etched in deep, throbbing waves, every muscle bruised and stiff. But the first thing she did, as she had done every hour she'd been conscious throughout the night, was look toward the fetal monitor. The rhythmic beeping was steady, weak but steady. Her baby was still fighting. Emily closed her eyes briefly, letting a shaky breath escape. She whispered a small promise to her daughter under her breath, stroking her belly with trembling fingers. "I'm not giving up. Neither are you." A quiet knock sounded at the partially opened door before Nurse Abby stepped inside with a tablet in her hand. Her expression was gentle but purposeful. "Hey," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Emily whispered. "But I'm still here." Abby smiled faintly. "I like your stubbornness." Emily tried to smile back, but fatigue washed over her again, making her eyelids droop. Abby approached the bed, pulling up a chair. "There's something we need to discuss. It's important. It's not bad, just important." Emily tensed. "Is it about my baby?" "No," Abby said quickly. "The baby's stable right now. This is about something else." She hesitated before lowering her voice. "Judge Hall came to see you last night." Emily's breath caught. Confusion flickered across her face. "The judge? Why?" Abby exchanged a glance with Emily as if weighing how much to reveal. "He wanted to make sure you were safe. He's been pushing to protect you." Emily blinked, unsure what to do with that information. Judges didn't visit victims. Judges didn't involve themselves. Judges didn't care personally unless something deeper was happening. Abby leaned in slightly. "He asked me to arrange something discreet. Only if you agree." Emily's pulse picked up. "What is it?" "A DNA test." Emily stiffened, 1,000 questions firing at once. "A DNA test? Why would he want that?" Abby sighed softly. "Because he believes he might know your mother." And he believes. She paused, her expression softening into something filled with quiet sympathy. "He believes you might be his daughter." For a moment, Emily forgot how to breathe. The world didn't stop, no dramatic pause, no cinematic freeze, but a strange, dizzying warmth flooded her chest, mixing with disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. "What?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Abby squeezed her hand. "I know it's overwhelming, but he didn't want to scare you. He didn't want to confuse you when you were already going through enough. He just wants to know the truth." Emily turned her gaze toward the window, her throat tightening. Her mother, Laura, had always avoided talking about her father. Sometimes she said he was gone. Sometimes she said he wasn't safe. Other times she said she didn't want him in their lives. But Emily remembered the sadness in her mother's eyes whenever she asked. The kind of sadness people carried when talking about love that never healed. "My mom," Emily whispered. Her maiden name was Carter. "She died before I could ask the things I should be asked." Abby touched her arm gently. "You don't have to do the test. It's your choice. No one is pressuring you." Emily swallowed hard. "He really thinks I'm his daughter." Yes, Abby said quietly. And honestly, she hesitated. The resemblance is strong, very strong. Emily looked down at her trembling hands. For most of her life, she'd believed she didn't have a father. Not one who cared anyway. She'd built her world around the fact that she had only her mother until Logan warped everything. The idea that she wasn't alone in the world, that someone out there might have been searching for her, grieving her, loving her without knowing her, felt too heavy to grasp, too dangerous to hope for. What if he's wrong? Emily whispered. Abby gave a small, sad smile. Then you'll know. But what if he's right? Emily closed her eyes as tears slipped down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from pain, at least not the physical kind. She was crying from the magnitude of what this meant. If he was her father, she wasn't alone anymore. She had someone. Someone who cared enough to go to the hospital, enough to risk his career, enough to build a team around her. And most of all, he cared enough to ask the question, even if the answer hurt him. Emily wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. Abby nodded gently. I'll bring the test. She left the room briefly and returned with a small sealed kit. All we need is a cheek swab, Abby explained. I'll handle the rest. No hospital record, no paper trail. Completely confidential. Emily nodded, her hands shaking slightly as Abby helped her sit up. Abby opened the sterile package, handed her the swab, and Emily placed it inside her mouth, rubbing it gently against her cheek. When she handed it back, Abby sealed it carefully, labeling it only with a number, no name, no identifiers. I'll take this to a lab I trust, Abby said. We should have results 24 to 48 hours. Emily's breath trembled. What about him? Judge Hall already provided his sample, Abby said softly. He didn't want you to feel pressured, so he did first, just in case you changed your mind. A tear slipped down Emily's cheek again. She didn't expect that detail to hit her so hard. A father would do that. A father would take the risk first. A father would make it easier for his child. Abby reached for her chart. You should rest now. Stress isn't good for the baby. But Emily wasn't ready to rest, Abby. The nurse paused at the door. Yeah. Do you think if it's true that he'll want me? Abby's expression softened with warmth. Emily, he already does. Emily pressed a hand over her mouth as emotion surged through her. She had been denied love for so long, by Logan, by life, by circumstance, that the idea of someone claiming her felt unreal. After Abby left, Emily lay against her pillow, tears slowly wetting the fabric. Her thoughts drifted back to her mother, her smile, her softness, the pain she carried silently. If Laura had loved Marcus, if they had been separated by circumstances Emily didn't yet know, then maybe this wasn't a coincidence. Maybe fate had brought her here. Maybe her daughter wouldn't grow up fatherless the way she had. Later that afternoon, a soft knock sounded. Emily looked toward the door, expecting Abby. Instead, Judge Marcus Hall stood there, his hands clasped, his expression cautious, hopeful, and unbearably gentle. Emily stared at him, her heart pounding. He didn't step inside. He didn't want to burden her further. He simply stood in the doorway with a trembling smile and said quietly, I just came to see how you are doing. Emily's breath hitched. He didn't say the word, but he didn't need to. She felt it. Deep, powerful, undeniable. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, wanted, protected. The DNA test was on its way. But in Emily's heart, something already new. And for the first time since her world fell apart, she wasn't scared of the truth. She was ready for it. Logan Reed had built his entire empire on control of information, control of public image, control of every person who entered his orbit. It was the force that had shaped him since childhood, the weapon he wielded in business, relationships, and every legal battle he had ever faced. But over the past 72 hours, that sense of control had begun to crack. He could feel the fracture beneath his skin. It crawled through his nerves like wildfire. And he knew without anyone needing to say a word that Emily's survival had ruined the plan he had crafted so carefully. He paced across his penthouse, the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a storm sweeping across the Seattle skyline. The city lights bled into the rain in a chaotic smear, mirroring the chaos inside him. Vanessa sat curled up in a corner of the room, her knees drawn to her chest, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She hadn't stopped shaking since the attack. Logan, she whispered, her voice trembling, they were going to blame me. I didn't mean stop talking. Logan's tone sliced sharper than a blade. Vanessa flinched as if struck. He dragged a hand through his hair and glared at his phone. Dozens of missed calls from his attorney. More from board members. Some from media contacts demanding statements. And several anonymous burner numbers, private firms he'd hired over the years. Everything was spiraling. This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered under his breath, pacing faster, almost manic. She wasn't supposed to survive. He had planned a fall, a fainting spell, a medical incident, something clean. Something tragic but accidental. Something that wouldn't tie back to him. Not this. Not a public violent attack in a courtroom caught on nearly every camera. Vanessa's heel connecting with Emily's stomach. The scream, the blood, the chaos, the paramedics rushing in. And then most damning of all, the judge's furious expression as he ordered security to detain Vanessa. That moment told Logan everything he needed to know. Someone in that courtroom had taken Emily's side. Worse, someone with power. And the judge, he remembered the judge's eyes, recognition, concern, rage. It wasn't normal, and it wasn't random. Logan stopped pacing as the truth slammed into him like a punch. He's helping her, Logan whispered. Vanessa blinked. Who? The judge. Logan turned toward her with a face drawn tight, consumed by a growing paranoia. He has a connection to her. You saw the way he looked at her. You saw how quickly he moved. He knows something. He cares. Vanessa shook her head. You're imagining it. Shut up. He snapped. Vanessa recoiled, curling tighter, tears spilling again. Logan didn't notice. His mind spun, connecting dots that to him formed a perfect picture. Someone behind the scenes was protecting Emily, someone with resources. Someone who had already caused trouble for him. Someone who was helping her fight back. He grabbed his phone and dialed one of the burner numbers. A gravelly voice answered. Yeah. I need surveillance on Judge Marcus Hall, Logan said through clenched teeth. I want every detail, who he meets, who he talks to, what he does, and I want it now. That'll cost extra. Do it, Logan hissed, and keep it discreet. He hung up and immediately dialed his attorney, Charles Avery. Charles answered on the first ring. Logan, the situation is worse than we thought. Emily's attorney is filing motions. There's chatter about reopening investigations connected to Amanda's case. And what about the footage? Logan snapped. The courtroom video. Charles hesitated. It's everywhere. The public feed caught the attack. You can't buy this one off. Logan slammed his hand against the counter, sending a glass shattering across the floor. You said you had connections. I do, Charles said tightly. But this has gone federal. Reed Corporation's finances are being flagged. Someone is digging where they shouldn't. Logan froze, his worst fear. His chest tightened. Find out who? Charles exhaled heavily. I have reason to believe Daniel Cross is involved. Logan swore violently under his breath. Cross was the one man he never wanted anywhere near his accounts. What about Detective Cole? He was taken off Amanda's case years ago. Charles hesitated again. Cole's name has resurfaced. If those two connect, you're in serious legal jeopardy. Logan felt the blood drain from his face. His perfect life, his empire, was beginning to crumble. The documents he'd buried, the payments he'd routed, the loose ends he'd tied, everything he hidden behind a polished mask was being dragged into the light. Then we shut them down, Logan said, voice low and venomous. We shut all of them down, before this gets out of hand. Logan, Charles warned, you can't threaten federal investigators or detectives or judges. Logan's eyes darkened. I don't threaten. There was something terrifying about the calmness in his voice. Vanessa watched him from the corner, her breath trembling. She knew that tone. She'd heard it before whenever Logan decided someone needed to disappear. After ending the call, Logan walked slowly toward the window, palms pressed against the cool glass. His reflection stared back at him, polished, powerful, unshakable. Except now cracks ran through that image. If Emily speaks, he loses everything. If she gets custody, his reputation will crumble. If she exposes his threats, his lawsuit goes down. If she connects him to Amanda's death, his life is over. She should have stayed quiet, he muttered. She should have stayed obedient. His jaw ticked violently. She forced my hand. A moment later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We have a location. Hospital room 317, security is light. Tell us how you want it handled. Vanessa let out a small gasp. Logan, no please. Logan didn't look at her. This ends now. Vanessa scrambled to her feet, panic exploding across her face. If you do this, they'll know. They'll know it wasn't an accident. I kicked her. I was there. If something happens to her, they'll come for me too. Logan finally turned, his expression cold enough to freeze the air. Then keep your mouth shut. Vanessa's breath hitched. You don't understand, she cried. She's pregnant. I didn't mean I don't care what you meant, Logan snapped. I care about cleaning up the mess you made. Vanessa staggered backward until her back hit the wall, tears streaking her cheeks. Logan walked past her, grabbing his jacket. I'll handle it, he said calmly, as if discussing business, not murder. And once this is over, everything goes back to normal. Vanessa knew in her gut that nothing about this was normal, not anymore. Logan Reed wasn't trying to scare Emily. He wasn't trying to threaten her. He was trying to eliminate her. Because a woman who survived him was a danger he couldn't control. And tonight, Logan Reed was preparing to strike. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every move he made was already being watched. Henry, Daniel, Julia, Abby, and Marcus were steps ahead, and for the first time in his life, Logan Reed was the one being hunted. The hallways of Seattle General Hospital were unnervingly quiet as the night shift settled into its rhythm. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, throwing long shadows across the polished floors. Most of the staff had retreated to their stations, and visitors were thinning out as security prepared for the late night lockdown. But tucked away on the far end of the third floor, room 317, Emily Carter slept restlessly, her pulse monitored by machines that beeped in fragile, uneven intervals. Abby Turner checked on her every 30 minutes, making sure her vitals were stable, double-checking the baby's heartbeat. Emily's body was exhausted, her spirit stretched thin, but she was still holding on barely. Downstairs in the hospital cafeteria, Detective Henry Cole sat in a corner booth nursing a bitter cup of coffee. He wasn't supposed to be here, none of them were. But after Daniel uncovered the offshore payments and Julia warned that Logan had gone quiet, too quiet, they made the decision to stay close. If Logan moves, Henry muttered, tapping the side of his mug, he'll move tonight. Daniel sat across from him, arms crossed, eyes scanning every door, every corridor. He already tried to silence her once. You think he'll wait for another chance? No, Henry said, voice dark. I think he'll make the next chance. Julia Monroe stood nearby with her phone pressed to her ear, whispering updates to Marcus. Abby had just finished her break when she rounded the corner toward the elevators and froze. A tall man in black scrubs walked past her, pushing a medical cart. She didn't recognize him. His posture was too stiff, his steps too deliberate. And when he passed under the light, Abby caught a glimpse of something inside the cart, a vial of clear sedative, and a syringe already prepped. Her pulse spiked. Nurses didn't leave syringes pre-filled, and the man wasn't wearing a badge. Abby followed him quietly. He turned toward the restricted recovery rooms toward Emily. Her heart jumped into her throat. Abby didn't think. She sprinted for the elevator, stabbing the 3 button repeatedly. Come on, she whispered. Come on. The elevator doors slid shut. Upstairs, the man in blackstrip stopped outside room 37. He glanced up and down the hallway, ensuring it was empty, then slowly pushed the door open. Emily slept lightly, her breathing shallow, her arm curled protectively around her belly. A single monitor beeped in soft, irregular intervals. The man slipped inside silently, closing the door behind him. He reached for the syringe. Then he leaned over the bed. You should be stayed quiet, he murmured. The elevator dinged. Abby sprinted out just as the overhead lights flickered, the building switching to low power mode before midnight. She raced down the hall, breath sharp, heart hammering, until she saw it. Emily's door was open a crack. A shadow moved inside. Abby didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open and saw the man leaning over Emily with the syringe poised above her IV line. Emily stirred faintly at the movement, brow furrowing, but she was too weak to react. Abby exploded into the room. Hey! The man spun toward her, eyes widening. Abby lunged for the call button on the wall. The man shoved her back hard, sending her crashing into the counter. Her shoulder hit the edge, pain shooting down her arm. But she didn't stop. She slammed her palm against the emergency button. The alarm shrieked through the corridor. Code blue? Room 3, sir! The man cursed under his breath and reached for Abby, but the door burst open again. Henry Cole charged in, gun drawn. Step away from the patient. The fake nurse froze, calculating. His gaze darted from the gun to Henry's stance, to Daniel rushing in behind him. Emily's breathing hitched. She opened her eyes slowly, panic rising. Well, what's happening? Henry didn't take his eyes off the intruder. Stay still. You're safe now. The man made a split-second decision, lunging for the syringe. But Daniel slammed into him before he could grab it, driving him to the floor. The cart rolled over, clattering loudly, scattering medical supplies everywhere. The man swung his arm, catching Daniel in the ribs, but Henry pinned him down with brutal efficiency, cuffing him while the intruder thrashed. Henry hauled him upright. Who sent you? The man smirked through a split lip. You already know. Henry's grip tightened. Reed. The intruder remained silent, but the answer was written across his face. Security stormed the room too late, and Henry handed the man off to them. He came here to kill a patient, Henry snapped. Call the police, not hospital administration, and lock this entire floor down. Abby hurried to Emily's bedside, her hands trembling but steady enough to check the baby's monitor. Emily sobbed with fear, pressing her hand to her chest. My baby, my baby. Abby touched her arm. The baby's okay. You okay? You safe. But Emily wasn't listening. Her eyes darted to the overturned cart, the syringe on the floor, the chaos. He tried to kill me, she whispered, voice cracking. He actually tried to kill me. Daniel straightened, wincing from where he'd been hit but still fierce with anger. That wasn't a random attacker, he said quietly. Logan sent him. Emily's whole body shook. She covered her mouth, tears spilling uncontrollably. He's going to kill me, she whispered. He's going to take my baby. Henry placed a firm hand on the bed rail. No, he's not, he said with a steady fire in his voice. Because after tonight you're under our protection. He'll never get near you again. Abby glanced toward the doorway. Marcus Hall stood there breathless, disheveled, his tie loosened, his eyes wide with terror. He must have run the second Julia told him the emergency alarm went off. He stepped into the room, his expression collapsing with relief when he saw Emily alive. Emily sobbed harder when she saw him. She didn't know the full truth yet, But she knew one thing instinctively: he was here for her. Marcus came to her bedside and gently placed his hand over hers. "You're safe," he whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." The room fell quiet, not with fear, but with a fierce, protective resolve shared by everyone long past the point of turning back. Henry stood guard at the door. Daniel made calls to federal contacts. Abby monitored the baby closely, ready for any sudden change. And Marcus stayed beside Emily, holding her hand long after her tears slowed. Tonight had confirmed the final truth they all feared: Logan Reed wasn't going to stop. He wouldn't retreat. He wouldn't accept defeat. He would kill Emily if given even a fraction of a chance. But tonight also proved something else. He wasn't invincible. His assassin was caught, plan failed. His threats were crumbling, and now for the first time, Logan had a real enemy. Not just one, an entire team: judge, a federal investigator, detective, a lawyer, a nurse, and the woman he could no longer control. Emily wasn't alone anymore, and Logan Reed was out of time. The morning of the final confrontation dawned gray and heavy over Seattle, a sky thick with storm clouds that felt almost prophetic. It had been 9 relentless days since the attack in the hospital, 9 days of uncovering evidence, preparing legal motions, tightening security, and turning Logan Reed's empire into a crumbling house of cards inching toward collapse. Emily remained under strict hospital protection, her condition stabilizing but still fragile. The baby's heartbeat was stronger now, still delicate, still not where the doctors wanted it, but fighting with stubborn resilience. Emily's bruises had begun to fade, but the emotional wounds were fresh, raw, and impossible to hide. She sat propped up against her pillows, breathing through another tense wave of discomfort in her abdomen when Abby stepped in with a tablet. "It's time," Abby said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair behind Emily's ear. "They're reserving the arrest warrant right now." Emily's stomach twisted, her heart racing with both fear and relief. Is Logan there?" "Yes," Abby said, her expression firm. "And he won't be walking away from this." Downstairs at the Seattle courthouse, Logan Reed arrived, flanked by 2 lawyers, his jaw tight. His expression collected but strained, like a man holding on to the last thread of a rope already burning away. Cameras exploded around him as reporters shouted questions. "Logan, are you involved in the attempted murder of your wife? Did you send a hitman to the hospital? What about the offshore accounts, the bribed officers, the first wife's case?" Logan's composure faltered. No comment, he snapped, forcing a stiff smile that fooled no one. His attorneys pushed him forward, but the tension in his stride betrayed him. Inside, Judge Marcus Hall waited at the bench, not as Emily's possible father, not as a grieving man carrying decades of loss, but as the judge presiding over the criminal charges. Every detail had been handled meticulously to avoid conflict of interest. Marcus insisted on transparency. He requested an oversight judge, but the state insisted he remain on the bench with full legal supervision to prevent Logan's team from exploiting loopholes. Marcus' expression was solemn, carved with determination and a quiet rage he kept tightly leashed. This wasn't personal, he told himself. It could not be personal. But when Logan entered the courtroom, something inside Marcus hardened. Logan smirked at him with the smug arrogance of a man who believed money still held power. But today it didn't. And Logan didn't know it yet. Henry, Julia, Daniel, and several federal agents filed in, carrying folders and sealed evidence packets. The courtroom filled with quiet tension as the bailiff instructed everyone to rise. Logan sat at the defense table, still posturing, still performing, until he saw Daniel cross. Logan's face drained of color. Daniel placed a thick black binder on the prosecution's table and opened it slowly, revealing the backbone of their case of financial records. Offshore transfers, bribery transactions, surveillance contracts, and the digital trail connecting Logan to the man who tried to kill Emily in the hospital. Julia followed with evidence from Amanda Reed's reopened case, photos, forensic discrepancies, the hidden voicemail Amanda left before her death, and the damning video she recorded hours before she died. Logan's breathing hitched as Henry placed the final stack of documents, a sworn confession from the detained hitman confirming Logan had hired him. The judge looked up. "Mr. Reed, do you understand the charges being presented against you today?" Logan's fingers twitched. "These charges are fabricated. I'm being targeted." Marcus's voice remained steady. "The evidence suggests otherwise. You are facing felony counts of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted homicide, domestic violence, obstruction of justice, bribery of public officials, and financial fraud." Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. Logan shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous." "I am a philanthropist. Sit down," Marcus ordered sharply. Logan froze, not because he respected authority, but because he recognized something in Marcus's tone he'd never heard before: absolute, immovable power. And for the first time, Logan realized he wasn't in control. His lawyers tugged him back into his seat. Marcus nodded toward the prosecution. "You may present your evidence." What followed was brutal. Julia laid out the timeline of abuse, threats, and manipulation of Emily. Daniel presented financial breakdowns that proved Logan had been laundering money through shell companies for years. Henry revealed the details of Amanda Reed's death, her last call, the video message, the payoff ledger connecting Logan to corrupt officers. Finally, the recorded hospital security footage played on the screen, the intruder sneaking into Emily's room, the syringe. The attack stopped only by Abby and Henry. Logan swallowed hard, sweat beading along his hairline. His attorneys looked pale. Marcus watched Logan with a gaze that carried decades of silent grief and 9 days of mounting fury. When the prosecution concluded, the courtroom fell into a heavy hush. Logan's attorney stood weakly. "Your Honor, we need time to." Marcus shook his head. "No, this case is moving forward. Bail is denied due to the clear and immediate threat to the victim." Logan lunged to his feet again, eyes wild. "You can't do this!" "I have rights. And your victim has the right to live," Marcus replied, voice sharp as a blade. "You tried to take that from her." Logan opened his mouth to argue, but 2 federal marshals stepped behind him, hands on their cuffs. "This isn't over," Logan spat, his voice cracking. "I will destroy all of you." Marcus leaned forward, eyes cold. "It's already over." The marshals locked the cuffs around Logan's wrists as reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. Logan's mask shattered. Panic twisted his features. He thrashed once, twice before being forced toward the doors, shouting curses that no one cared about anymore. He wasn't a billionaire now. He wasn't a mogul. He was a criminal, an exposed predator. A man finally facing the consequences he had outrun for years. The moment the doors behind him, the courtroom let out a collective exhale. Daniel slumped into his chair. Henry rubbed a hand over his face, exhausted but relieved. Julia pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, "We did it." Marcus dismissed the court, but his hands shook slightly as he gathered his notes. Before he could leave, Henry stepped forward. "You saved her," Henry said quietly. "You saved both of them." Marcus's voice softened. "She saved herself. I just helped the world finally see the truth." Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into Emily's hospital room. She was sitting up again, anxiety haunting her eyes until she saw him. "Is it over?" she asked, voice small. Marcus's eyes softened with overwhelming relief. "Yes," he said, approaching her bedside. "He's in custody. He won't hurt you again." Emily covered her face with shaking hands as tears fell silently, this time from relief, not fear. Marcus hesitated only a moment before gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily." She looked up, her eyes red. The results came. Emily's breath caught. He swallowed hard. "You were my daughter." Emily's tears spilled faster, a sob breaking free. Marcus sat beside her, unable to stop his own eyes from burning. After decades of loss, grief, searching, he finally found her. And she finally found him. Emily reached for his hand not as a victim seeking help, but as a daughter accepting the father she never knew she had. Marcus squeezed gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in months, maybe years, Emily truly believed it. The nightmare was ending, a family was beginning, and Logan Reed's empire was gone forever. In the end, the deepest lesson woven through Emily Carter's journey is that survival is not just about endurance, it is about reclaiming the power someone tried to take from you. Emily spent years under the shadow of a man who believed dominance was the same thing as love, who measured his worth by how thoroughly he controlled the people around him. Logan Reed built his life on manipulation, intimidation, and the belief that money could erase consequences. But as Emily fought through heartbreak, violence, and betrayal, she discovered a truth many victims never get the chance to learn. Even the most powerful abuser becomes small when the truth finally sees daylight. Emily's story teaches that silence is the soil where abusers plant their roots. Breaking that silence, even trembling, even terrified, is the first crack in their foundation. Her courage didn't come from being fearless. It came from deciding that her daughter deserved a world without the man who tried to erase them both. She teaches us that bravery often looks like getting up the next morning. It looks like filing a report, telling the truth, or saying no after years of being forced to say yes. Her survival wasn't loud or cinematic, it was steady, quiet, relentless, and it saved her life. Another defining lesson of this story is that justice, when pursued with integrity, becomes more powerful than the people who try to corrupt it. When Judge Marcus Hall and the others stepped into Emily's life, they shattered the dangerous myth that victims must fight alone. Marcus embodied the truth that authority means nothing if not used to protect the vulnerable. His transformation from a distant figure on the bench to someone willing to risk everything for a woman he suspected was his daughter reminds us how deeply justice depends on human empathy. It is easy to follow the letter of the law. It takes real courage to follow the spirit of it. Marcus, Henry, Daniel, Julia, and Abby each carried their own broken pieces, guilt, mistakes, regrets, losses. Yet those very fractures allowed them to recognize Emily's pain, to refuse to look away, and to act where others remained silent. They remind us that heroes are rarely perfect. They are people who choose to step forward at the exact moment when stepping forward matters most. This story also reminds us that truth always leaves a trail. Logan's wealth, influence, and arrogance gave him the illusion of invincibility, but illusions disappear the moment someone shines a light through them. His greatest mistake was believing that he could rewrite reality simply because he had the resources to bury the evidence. But the truth has a way of sticking to the world, lingering in whispered warnings, bruises hidden beneath sleeves, suspicious records, and voices that refuse to stay quiet. Logan learned too late that lies cannot outlast the people brave enough to expose them. He also teaches a powerful and uncomfortable lesson: abusers are not monsters in the dark. They are often men who look respectable in daylight. Men society trusts, admires, even celebrates. His downfall is a warning that evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles for the cameras, donates to charity, and shakes hands with politicians. But eventually all masks crack. Eventually the truth outruns the lies. Another lesson emerges in the healing of generational wounds. Emily grew up believing she had no father, believing she didn't deserve protection, believing she had to carry her burdens alone. Marcus spent decades grieving the daughter he lost, the woman he loved, the family that slipped through his fingers. Their reunion shows that broken beginnings do not define the ending. Life sometimes returns what was taken, change, fragile, imperfect, but still beautiful. Their story teaches us that love can find its way through years of separation, silence, and pain. And when it does, it becomes a force strong enough to rebuild what once felt shattered beyond repair. Emily's daughter, too, becomes a symbol of rebirth. She represents a future not shaped by fear but by strength, honesty, and protection, a future freed from the cycle of abuse that nearly claimed her life before she was even born. Finally, the overarching lesson is about the value of accountability and the cost of inaction. Logan's power grew not just because he was dangerous, but because too many people looked away while he hurt the women in his life. Some were paid to stay quiet, others were intimidated. Some didn't want to believe a wealthy man could commit such horrors. But when the right people finally refused to look away, everything changed. Emily's story is a call to action not only for those personally affected by abuse, but for everyone who hears whispers of harm, sees warning signs, or notices patterns that don't add up. It teaches that stepping in can save a life, speaking up can shatter a cycle, doing nothing can be deadly. Emily's journey does not end with Logan's arrest. Her healing will take time, strength, and support. But her story leaves readers with something powerful: the certainty that even the darkest chapters can lead to light, that justice can rise from tragedy, and that the human spirit, though bruised, though exhausted, though shaken, can still rise. She shows us that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of reclaiming one's life. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all: trauma does not define you. What you build after the trauma does. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of my latest videos. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below. I always read all your comments.